Alright guys, welcome back to another video. In this video we're doing this Leviathan sculpture that showed up in all 4 Avengers movies. This is going to be the final result of this video. This is a 2-part video, so subscribe, stay notified when the next video comes out. Let's get into it. Before we begin, I want to talk about the clay that I'm using. This is monster clay. I'm using the medium clay. So it's the medium hardness, so there's not hard or soft, it's just the medium. And this is the actual clay. It's a very firm clay. It never gets like rock hard. It always stays somewhat, it's a bit stiff, but then if you heat it up in the microwave, it can get nice. It can get all the way to liquid. So you could even maybe cast from a mold or something like that. But yeah, this is the clay that I'm using. So, and now these are the tools that I'm gonna be using in this video. First off is this big, sort of a straight, big and flat tool. This is to get nice, even, clean edges, or not edges, but I mean surfaces. And this is going to be it's basically like a dentist tool. And this is to get in into the nice, small little details that you can't really fit your finger in. So that's that tool. Next is actually a brush, and I use that with the Gamsel, which is a mineral spirits, which actually dissolves the clay, and it gets a nice, smooth, clean surface. This is the same as the first one, just a bit rounder edge to it, which just gives a rounder finish, a smoother finish. This is actually basically like a finger, so it's I use it somewhat like my finger to smooth out edges. It's a bit skinnier for like nooks and crannies and stuff like that. So that's that one. This is a set of tools that I purchased all at the same time a while back. They're basically just to scrape off bits of clay. These ones are a bit smaller to get those nice, again, nooks and crannies, the small details, and they're very useful as well. This is like the first one, but it's just a rounder one, is to get holes and curved edges. And there's some pliers, and I use that with this wire, which is actually for the armature, which you're going to see shortly. And lastly, these aren't really necessary, but I use these in the actual pillars, which you'll see later. To get in between the pillars, as you can see with that one, it has a nice flat edge. It gets a nice clean surface. With this other tool, it'd be very difficult to get in between the pillars. As you can see now, it's kind of uncomfortable to get it. With this one, it's a lot easier to get in between, between the pillars. Again, you'll see this later. And now, this is actually started in 2019, so it's almost 3 years in the making. I was 16 at the time, almost 17. Anyways. So I'm beginning to create the armature. So I'm beginning in with the wire that I described earlier and wrapping it in aluminum foil. And I have a drawing of it, basically how I'm going to be building it, a rough estimate. I had no idea really how the design was in the beginning. I just kind of winged it in the start. And it really came back to bite me in the ass later. But now I'm beginning to fill it in with monster clay all throughout. So I heated it up in the microwave, make sure it was nice and warm, and then just became applying a layer all throughout. Beginning obviously in the front, I wanted to build it up nicely in the front to really somewhat basically just block it out how I saw it. So I would look at reference images, which also was a big hurdle with this project specifically, was the lack of reference images. I had to really go back to the first Avengers final battle and really just look at the pictures, screenshot, slow it down, and just really look at all the small details. And that was a time consuming part of it, and the reason why it took me nearly 3 years to do. So just the frustration of okay, I don't even know how to make this part, how to design the top plate or the side or all the individual little details or the face, and that's really what was really time consuming. And now as you can see, I had the wire to have a nice sort of again, this is the part of the armature, but just even if I'm done with the armature, I still add extended bits of wire to make sure that it's still somewhat sturdy, it's not flopping around. Because even though this does become sturdy, it does somewhat curve while it's hardening, and it just doesn't look good. So just smoothing it out, getting a clean surface. I obviously built it up a lot more. As you can see there, I added an armature in the front. Later, even though I was gonna have to cut that out because, again, I was not familiar with the design, so I didn't realize at the front I had sort of cutouts in the sides. You'll see later. But anyways, now I'm building up the top plate, so it has individual plates, and they're all supposed to be the exact same design, just repeated. And it was and also at the time I didn't see the reference images closely enough, which is also another mistake, not seeing them closely enough. And as you can see, that was a very substantial jump of details. Like basically the whole, those side pieces, I basically had already built them up. And that was because I lost a bunch of recording. I was basically moving all my data from my Mac, which you can see in the video right now, to the current PC that I have, which was a custom built one. So I just lost all the recording to that. Anyways, you probably don't care. Back to the sculpture. At this point, I had already somewhat understood the design a bit more, but I was still, it was still somewhat time consuming to get it smooth, to get it looking clean, coming in with the mineral spirit to really get that nice clean edges. Of course, at this time, I hadn't purchased the yellow tools that you saw earlier, and those have a really nice sharp edge, and that would have been pretty handy to get all the details in. And I'm also at this point, I'm really like leaning towards the left side of the sculpture. That's because I was considering, okay, overall my plan was to eventually make a mold of this so I could paint it, because I didn't want to be able to paint it. I wanted to see it fully realized and fully, look like the one in the movie. So I was like, okay, if I create a mold, I really do not want to do this twice. So I was like, okay, I'll just do half of it. So I'll make the mold of half of it. But then I realized that these loops, the top plate connects to the main body, they were going to get in the way of the mold. They were going to basically lock in when I'd made a silicon mold, and it was going to be impossible to mold. So what I'm doing right now is separating the top plate from the main body. And then later, overall, this was where it was kind of downhill from here, because I realized how time consuming this was going to be to do this, all of it, for me just to have half of a Leviathan, not the full thing, just half of it. So later on, you'll see how I end up finishing this and painting it, but I'll probably save the rest of it for the next video. And you can see it's 2021. This is actually April. So from the last clip to this one is actually a whole year time skip. I basically, basically I gave up on it. I was like, okay, it's like, what am I gonna do? I was just sort of confused. I had basically no knowledge of making silicon molds at all. So I wasn't even like, I had no idea what I was gonna do. But a year later, I was like, all right, I want to come back to it. I do want to complete this. I do want to see the final result somehow. So, all right, I didn't think too much of it, and I just continued and began sculpting again.
So I can shoot for the star beam, yeah. Heart race, pounding. So I can shoot for the star beam. So I can shoot. So I can shoot for the star beam, yeah. Fast, heart race, pounding. Get that. So I can shoot for the star beam. So I can shoot. So I can shoot for the star beam.
And now I'm beginning to realize that the top plate, after a year of not looking at it, it really lost its definition. I think the way that I basically made it initially was just sort of like I had a flat plate and I tried to add the scales on top of it instead of building scale on top of scale. So it just wasn't right. So I was gonna basically redo it all again, but this time with the knowledge of me, I was just gonna do half of it. I only applied the changes to half of the top plate, didn't do the other half. I wasn't worried about it anymore. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do this half and we'll go with it from there. So now as you can see, it does look a lot cleaner, a lot sharper, but still, I still got the design wrong of the actual plate. You can see in the front now, it's cut in. It has sort of like that trapezoid with a triangle edge at the end, but it was still incorrect. It was not a correct design. And then I had this, idea. Okay, so if I'm gonna create the mold and everything, the whole bottom needs to be smooth. So I later on you'll see me trying to smooth the whole bottom, making it look perfect. Now what I'm doing, I added this basically a fish line. God damn it, this fish line all the way to the middle, so that I can have an exact midpoint. Because I'm gonna be adding this basically this column at the middle where the pillars come up. Basically, like it has these sort of like spine looking things. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. Okay. Anyways, I began to add these all across, and I use the fish line to make a midline, and now I'm beginning to add them. But later on, what you'll see is that actually, right now how they're looking like, I wasn't too big of a fan of it. Initially, yeah, I wasn't really thinking. I was just, I was just working. I was just doing it, adding them. Later on, I'm like, okay, they look too spread out. They don't look like in the movie. They have like a nice sort of, way they sort of like move and like have like almost like a wave to them. It's not just one curve. But also I made a big alteration to the design of the Leviathan, which was make it shorter. The Leviathan is actually extremely long, and obviously in the movie it's ridiculously long. It's supposed to be like, you know, like the size of a fucking airplane. What I mean is, like, proportionally the Leviathan is much more extended than when I made it, and I did not want to do that. It was just gonna be too much. So I was like, okay, I'll just, you know, make it so it looks somewhat like the movie. Try to make it as resemble as much the small details, the big details of that, but the sort of the length, I just didn't want to do too much. You can see now the pillars, I was a lot happy with how they look there. You know, they're a bit more thinner, they're a bit more closer, and they look nicer. And now I'm beginning to actually define the details. So again, I had to really look for these reference images to find the right ones, and I began to work on the actual pillars and add the design, add the dimension, and all the different little details and everything.
Some people go to war for none. Me, I go to war for some. Some people need knives and guns.
And honestly, the number one most useful information I extrapolated from this, you know, working on this sculpture, was really, you know, learning the design. You know, I basically, you know, really studied this design, learned basically the language of the design, if that makes any sense. But basically, you know, okay, so the pillar goes here, it has sort of this support thing on it, and the, you know, the top plates all overlap each other and have sort of smaller details in it. And so again, I had to really scour through all the reference images and really find it. And then later on, those top plates also have sort of a loop that connects to the main body. And so again, it was a lot of things that I had to pay attention to. And now what I'm doing, what I mentioned earlier, was actually splitting it in half, because I was only gonna make a mold of half of the entire sculpture. So now I'm actually cutting the other half of the top plate, and it was really just a time-consuming thing to really take it all out and do all this. But again, I did want to make a mold and be able to paint it, because like I stated before, this clay does not harden. It doesn't become like, I use the epoxy sculpt in my other videos, which is a 2-part epoxy that actually hardens like a rock, and you can actually paint it. This, you know, this stays soft. Again, not soft, but somewhat firm, but it will never be fully hard, and you won't be able to paint it. So as you can see earlier, I already smoothed out the bottom already, and I'm beginning to really get into the nitty-gritty of the details and smoothing it out and cleaning up the design, because finally I got the top plate design right. So I finally got it right, and I was actually beginning to clean up the details, add the bevel on the edges. As you can see there, I'm gonna add the nice bevel on the top plates. And now another thing that was extremely time consuming, which was when this top plate kept separating and breaking on me, and it really just pissed me off, man. It would just break, it would bend, it would do this, it would do that. I could add supports and I could add all the armature, and it just would not work. So it was just becoming extremely frustrating, having to go back and fix it and put more clay inside it and like make sure it's sturdy, and nothing would work really. So this is the final result that we have so far, and stay tuned to my next video when I'm actually gonna be finishing completely the sculpture, painting it, having it completely finished, and you'll see that video. I say in about a couple weeks you'll be seeing this video. So again, subscribe, stay tuned for the next video, and thank you for watching.
I might make it rain today. I got paid off pain today. Thought it'd take the pain away. In my own lane, finger roll. I would never sell my only soul. Heard your whole team was for sale. Heard it's on the market for the low. Who the realest, we might never know. All this acting, you gon' play a role. Give you the world.